No, that can't be true. My ex-husband's voice was barely louder than a whisper. Yet in the silent courtroom, everyone heard him. For the past 2 days, he had been trying to convince the judge that I was an unstable, emotionally damaged veteran whose combat injuries made me incapable of raising a child. His expensive attorney stood confidently beside him. His former mistress, now his wife, sat in the gallery with her arms crossed, wearing the same smug expression she had worn every morning in court. Then the judge opened my military file. He quietly adjusted his glasses. He read a single sentence. That was all it took. The color disappeared from my ex-husband's face as though every drop of blood had left him at once. No, he whispered again. That can't be true. The judge slowly looked up. It appears, he said calmly, that this court has been given an incomplete picture. At that moment, I realized something. For the first time in nearly 10 years, Daniel was afraid. Not because of me, because of the truth. The strange part was, I had never tried to hide it. He had simply never cared enough to ask. 9 years earlier, I didn't return home from my final deployment looking like a hero. I came home in pieces. The military flight landed at Pope Army Airfield just outside Fayetteville, North Carolina, on a gray October afternoon. I barely remember the landing. The pain medication blurred everything. I remember the smell of antiseptic, the heavy weight of my left leg wrapped in braces, and the sharp ache in my ribs every time I tried to breathe. I remember looking out the small window and thinking how green North Carolina looked after months overseas. Most of all, I remember believing I was finally coming home to my husband and my baby boy. Our son Noah was only 3 months old. I had kissed his tiny forehead before leaving for what was supposed to be a short deployment. Instead, everything changed. Our convoy was attacked during a humanitarian evacuation. I helped pull 2 young soldiers from a burning vehicle before another explosion threw me several feet across the road. Broken ribs, a shattered pelvis, severe damage to my left knee. Months of rehabilitation ahead. The doctors told me I would walk again eventually, but it would take time. Time I believed my family and I would face together. I couldn't have been more wrong. Daniel met me at Walter Reed with flowers. Looking back, I think he bought them because people expected him to. He smiled for the cameras, held my hand while the nurses watched, and even kissed my forehead. I remember thinking how fortunate I was. I didn't realize he had already made his decision. 2 days later, after I was transferred closer to home, he walked into my hospital room carrying a manila envelope. He didn't sit down. He didn't ask how therapy was going. He didn't ask whether I needed anything. He simply placed the envelope on my blanket. I've already signed everything. I frowned. What is it? The divorce papers. For a moment, I honestly believed the medication was making me imagine things. What? I can't do this anymore, Emma. I stared at him. We have a baby. I know. I'm still in the hospital. I know. I can't even stand. He looked away. Then he said the words I will never forget. I didn't marry someone I'd have to spend the rest of my life taking care of. The room became painfully quiet. I searched his face for even the smallest sign of guilt. There wasn't any. What about Noah? I'll send child support. You haven't even held him this week. He'll be better off without all this. He gestured toward my wheelchair, toward my braces, toward me. For years, I wondered whether he regretted saying those words. Now I know he meant every one of them. 3 days after I was discharged, my older brother Michael brought me home. Daniel wasn't there. His closet was empty. Half the furniture was gone. So were the family photographs. The only thing waiting for me on the kitchen counter was a folder from his attorney. Later that afternoon, my neighbor quietly walked across the street carrying a casserole. She hesitated before speaking. I wasn't sure if anyone had told you. Told me what? I saw Daniel yesterday. My stomach tightened. He was moving into a condo downtown. She paused. He wasn't alone. I already knew. Somehow, I already knew. A week later, another military spouse sent me a picture she had accidentally taken at a restaurant. Daniel was laughing, holding hands with a woman from his office, the same woman he had always insisted was just a coworker. The timestamp on the picture was from before my deployment ended, maybe even before it began. The affair hadn't started after my injuries. It had simply become easier for him to stop pretending. Meanwhile, every morning followed the same routine. Pain medication, physical therapy, learning how to move from the bed to my wheelchair without dropping Noah, trying not to cry whenever my ribs screamed in pain as I picked him up. My VA therapist once asked what frightened me most. I surprised myself with the answer, that my son will grow up believing his father left because of me. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said something that stayed with me forever. Children don't remember who walked away. They remember who stayed. That sentence carried me through the darkest nights. Some evenings, I slept sitting upright because lying down hurt too much. Other nights, Noah cried for hours with colic while I slowly made my way through the hallway using a walker, praying my leg wouldn't give out before he finally fell asleep. There were moments when I wanted to quit, moments when I wondered if Daniel had been right. Then Noah would wrap his tiny fingers around mine. Suddenly, I had another reason to stand. Literally. Every painful step during rehabilitation became a promise, not to prove Daniel wrong, but to make sure my son never doubted that someone would always fight for him. I had survived a battlefield. Now I had another battle to win. People often say time heals every wound. It doesn't. Time simply gives you more opportunities to decide what you'll do with the wounds you already have. For me, healing wasn't measured in months. It was measured in small victories. The first time I stood without someone catching me. The first time I crossed the living room using only a cane. The first morning I lifted Noah from his crib without crying from the pain in my ribs. Those moments meant more than any medal I'd ever earned because nobody applauded them. Nobody pinned another ribbon on my chest. But they were victories just the same. Every weekday started before sunrise. Noah usually woke around 5:30, cheerful long before I was ready to face another day. I'd slowly ease myself out of bed, gripping the nightstand until my left leg steadied beneath me. The doctors had been right. I walked again, but I never walked the same. Cold mornings reminded me of every fracture. Rain made my knee ache like an old injury from another lifetime. Still, I walked. After feeding Noah, my brother Michael would stop by before heading to work. "You good?" he'd ask every morning. "I'm good." "You sure?" "No." That became our running joke. He'd laugh, kiss Noah on the forehead, fix anything around the house that needed attention, and leave without ever making me feel like a burden. He never once treated me the way Daniel had. My parents lived in Arizona, nearly 2,000 miles away, but they called every evening. Mom sent care packages. Dad read bedtime stories over video calls until Noah was old enough to recognize his grandfather's voice. Little by little, our small broken family stopped feeling broken. After almost 18 months of rehabilitation, I was medically retired from active duty. Handing over my military ID was harder than I expected. The Army had been my identity since I was 22. Now I had to figure out who Emma Carter was without a uniform. Fortunately, one of my former commanding officers refused to let me disappear. Colonel Diane Foster called me one afternoon. "I hear you've been sitting at home too long." "I have a 4-year-old. So do half the people at the Pentagon," I laughed. "I can't relocate. I didn't ask you to." She offered me a civilian position with a Department of Defense logistics contractor in Raleigh. It wasn't glamorous, no deployments, no command, no rank, but it allowed me to use everything I'd learned over 20 years in uniform while spending every evening at home with Noah. I accepted. Money was still tight. I sold my SUV and bought a dependable used sedan. Our townhouse wasn't fancy. The carpet had seen better days. The kitchen cabinets squeaked. The backyard was barely large enough for a swing set. But it was ours. More importantly, it was peaceful. Daniel faithfully paid the child support ordered by the court. Nothing more. No birthday cards, no Christmas visits, no phone calls. Sometimes months passed without Noah even mentioning him. When he finally became old enough to ask difficult questions, I promised myself I wouldn't poison his heart. One evening after his kindergarten graduation, he climbed onto the couch beside me. "Mom? Yeah, buddy? Why doesn't my dad come?" Children ask impossible questions with remarkable simplicity. I turned off the television. "Your dad made different choices. Did he not love me?" That question hit harder than any explosion I'd survived overseas. I pulled him into my arms. "Listen to me." He looked up. "There is nothing wrong with you." "Then why?" "Sometimes grown-ups make selfish decisions." "Is he a bad man?" I thought carefully before answering. "No." He frowned. "He made bad choices. There was a difference, one I hoped Noah would understand someday. As the years passed, I watched my son become the kind of young man every parent hopes to raise. He held doors open for strangers. He thanked waitresses. He helped elderly neighbors carry groceries without being asked. Every Veterans Day, he insisted on placing flowers beneath the local memorial, not because I told him to, because he wanted to. He became fascinated with military history. He devoured books about World War II, read biographies of Medal of Honor recipients, and watched documentaries with his grandfather. One Saturday morning, he looked at me across the breakfast table. "Mom, what is it? Were you scared? Where? When you were deployed?" I smiled. "Every day." His eyes widened. "Really? Being brave doesn't mean you aren't scared." "What does it mean?" "It means doing the right thing anyway." He nodded thoughtfully. I could almost see the lesson settling into his heart. Meanwhile, life wasn't nearly as perfect for Daniel as social media suggested. Friends occasionally mentioned seeing him at expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, a beautiful house in Charlotte, photos with his wife, and expensive cars. From the outside, he appeared to have everything he wanted. I stopped paying attention years earlier, until one afternoon changed everything. It happened during Noah's 4th grade award ceremony. His teacher pulled me aside after the program. "Mrs. Carter." "Yes?" "I wanted you to know Noah has been nominated." "For what?" "The Carolina Junior Leadership Academy." I had never heard of it. She smiled. "It's an incredibly selective program." Later that evening, I looked it up. Leadership training, academic scholarships, community service, mentorship from retired military officers and respected civic leaders. Only a small number of students were accepted each year. Noah worked tirelessly on his application. When the acceptance letter finally arrived months later, he burst through the front door, waving the envelope. "I got in!" I hugged him so tightly that he laughed. "I knew you could." Neither of us realized someone else had been watching. Exactly 3 weeks later, a certified envelope arrived from a law office. I opened it while standing in my kitchen. The first sentence made my stomach sink. Petition for full custody. Daniel wasn't asking to spend time with his son. He was asking the court to take him away from me. As I kept reading, I realized this wasn't about fatherhood. It was about winning. I must have read the first page of the custody petition 10 times before the words finally sank in. Petition for sole legal and physical custody. Not visitation. Not shared parenting. Daniel wanted complete custody. He wanted our son. For several minutes, I simply stood in my kitchen staring at the papers while the kettle whistled on the stove. Noah walked in carrying his backpack. "Mom," I quickly folded the documents. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just work." He nodded and headed upstairs. I waited until I heard his bedroom door close before allowing myself to cry. Not because I was afraid of losing, but because after 9 years of silence, Daniel had suddenly decided he deserved to be called a father. The next morning, I met with an attorney another veteran had recommended. Her office overlooked downtown Raleigh. Nothing fancy, just shelves filled with legal books and framed family photos. Her name was Linda Brooks. She had spent nearly 30 years practicing family law. She read the petition without saying a word. When she finally looked up, she sighed. "This isn't really about custody." I figured. He waited almost a decade. I know. He barely used the visitation rights he already had. I know. She tapped one paragraph with her pen. Here's the real reason. The filing claimed my combat injuries had left me physically limited. It also suggested I continued to struggle with emotional instability related to my military service. Daniel's attorney argued that Noah would have greater opportunities and a more stable home if he lived with his father. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was ridiculous. "A stable home?" Linda nodded. "We're gonna need documentation. I've got medical records. We'll need more than that. I've completed every VA evaluation they've requested." "Good. I've worked full-time for 7 years." "Excellent. My son's teachers know me. We'll call them." She leaned forward. "Emma." "Yes?" "Tell me something." "What?" "Have you ever hidden anything from the court?" "No." "Have you ever lied about your medical condition?" "Never." She smiled. "Then don't start worrying." I wanted to believe her, but I'd lived long enough to know that the truth doesn't always win immediately. Sometimes it has to fight for its place. Over the next several weeks, we gathered records, school attendance, medical evaluations, employment history, volunteer work, letters from neighbors, statements from Noah's teachers. Every document told the same story: a stable home, a healthy child, an involved mother. Meanwhile, Daniel's attorney seemed determined to turn my military service into a weakness. During depositions, the questions became more insulting. Mrs. Carter: yes. Do loud noises still startle you sometimes? Occasionally. Do you still experience nightmares? Occasionally. So you admit your combat experiences continue to affect your daily life. They affect my memories. Isn't that the same thing? No. He frowned. I continued. I remember my deployment. I remember losing friends. I remember being wounded. But I have never neglected my son. He changed direction. You still walk with a limp? Yes. Can you run? No. If Noah were in danger, my body would hurt afterward. I held his gaze. But I'd still reach him first. He didn't ask another question for nearly a minute. Outside the conference room, Linda smiled. You handled that beautifully. I've testified before military review boards. I could tell. Still, something about Daniel's behavior continued to bother me. He wasn't acting like a father trying to reconnect with his son. He was acting like a businessman chasing an investment. The answer came unexpectedly. One Saturday afternoon, Noah was at soccer practice when Michael stopped by with coffee. He looked unusually serious. I think I know what's going on. What? I ran into an old coworker. So, he works for Daniel's company. I waited. Apparently, Daniel has been bragging. About what? That his son was accepted into the Carolina Junior Leadership Academy. I frowned. He never even congratulated Noah. Michael nodded. According to my friend, Daniel keeps telling people his son is on track for military academy recommendations and scholarship opportunities. Everything suddenly made sense. The Leadership Academy, the scholarships, the prestige. Daniel didn't suddenly want to raise his son. He wanted to claim him, to show him off, to rewrite history. That realization hurt less than I expected, mostly because it confirmed what I had already known. He still hadn't changed. The trial began in early spring. The county courthouse felt strangely familiar. Military hearings had taught me how to stay calm under pressure. Still, family court was different. This wasn't my career. This was my child. Daniel looked successful. A tailored navy suit, an expensive watch, a perfect haircut. His wife sat behind him wearing pearls. They looked like the image of suburban success. I arrived carrying one worn leather folder. Inside it were 9 years of truth. Judge Eleanor Watkins entered precisely at 9. She greeted both attorneys politely before reviewing the case file. Daniel's lawyer spoke first. For nearly an hour, he presented a heartbreaking picture. A wounded veteran, permanent physical limitations, emotional trauma, a child who supposedly needed greater stability. Several times he referred to me as disabled. Each time I quietly wrote notes. When it was our turn, Linda didn't attack Daniel. Instead, she introduced evidence, employment records, medical evaluations, school reports, volunteer certificates. Every witness described the same woman: dependable, patient, disciplined, present. Then Daniel took the stand. He spoke confidently. I've always loved my son. Linda stood. When was the last birthday party you attended? Silence. When was the last parent-teacher conference? Silence. What is Noah's favorite subject? Daniel hesitated. Science. It is history, she replied. What size shoes does your son wear? No answer. What food is he allergic to? Daniel looked toward his attorney. I don't remember. Linda thanked him and returned to her seat. Judge Watkins remained expressionless. She quietly reviewed the exhibits before speaking. I've noticed repeated references to Mrs. Carter's military service. She looked toward Daniel's attorney. Has the court received her complete military record? No, Your Honor. I'd like to review it. The courtroom immediately fell silent. The clerk disappeared through a side door. A few minutes later, she returned carrying a sealed military file. The room became so quiet, I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The clerk carefully placed the sealed military file in front of Judge Eleanor Watkins. She broke the seal without ceremony. No dramatic speech, no theatrical pause, just the calm confidence of someone who understood that facts carried more weight than emotion. She slowly turned the first few pages. Service history, promotions, performance evaluations, medical reports, awards. No one spoke. Daniel sat upright beside his attorney, looking almost relaxed again. I could tell he believed the military file would simply confirm everything his lawyer had been arguing all morning, that I had been seriously injured and permanently limited. He had no idea what else was in that file. Neither did his attorney. Judge Watkins continued reading. From time to time, she traced a line with her finger before turning the page. Then she stopped. She hadn't reached the end of the file. She stopped halfway through. Her eyes remained on one paragraph for several long seconds. She read it again. Then she looked toward me. Mrs. Carter? Yes, Your Honor. Was this section ever classified? Yes, ma'am. And it has since been declassified? Yes. She nodded once. I see. Across the courtroom, Daniel shifted in his chair. For the first time that morning, he looked uncomfortable. The judge adjusted her glasses. I'm going to read one sentence into the record. Everyone in the courtroom seemed to lean forward at the same moment. She read calmly. Despite sustaining multiple life-threatening injuries, Lieutenant Colonel Emma Carter repeatedly refused evacuation until every soldier and civilian under her protection had been safely evacuated. She continued. Military psychological evaluations conducted afterward unanimously concluded that her judgment under extreme pressure remained exemplary, and that she demonstrated extraordinary decision-making, emotional stability, and unwavering dedication to those in her care. Silence. Complete silence. The words settled over the courtroom. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. I hadn't heard those sentences spoken aloud in years. When I opened them again, Daniel had gone completely pale. His mouth opened slightly. No, he whispered. His eyes never left me. That's not possible. Judge Watkins looked directly at him. Mr. Carter. He didn't answer. I assume your attorney has reviewed this document. His lawyer looked genuinely confused. No, Your Honor. I was never provided the complete military record. The judge raised one eyebrow. Interesting. Daniel's attorney quickly flipped through the copy the clerk had handed him. His expression changed with every page. He stopped at the same paragraph. Then he turned another page. Then another. Finally, he slowly closed the file. Not slammed, not dropped, simply closed it. He removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead. That quiet gesture said more than any objection could have. Linda leaned toward me and whispered, I think their case just fell apart. But the hearing wasn't over. Judge Watkins folded her hands. Mr. Carter. Daniel finally looked up. You have repeatedly argued that Mrs. Carter's military injuries made her incapable of making sound parenting decisions. Yes, Your Honor. Yet the official evaluations conducted by the United States Army conclude exactly the opposite. Daniel swallowed. I wasn't aware. The judge interrupted him. I believe that has become quite obvious. A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Judge Watkins continued. This court also has before it 9 years of school records. She looked down again. Perfect attendance at parent conferences. She turned another page. Volunteer work. Another page. Medical appointments. Another. Teacher evaluations. Then she looked at Daniel. I have found no evidence that Mrs. Carter has ever failed to place her son's needs ahead of her own. She paused. I have, however, found substantial evidence that you voluntarily chose not to participate in your son's life for nearly 9 years. Daniel's attorney stood. Your Honor? She raised one hand. I'm not finished. He sat back down. The judge turned toward Noah. Our son had quietly remained beside the court-appointed child advocate throughout the hearing. He wasn't frightened, only confused. Judge Watkins smiled gently. Noah? Yes, ma'am. Do you love your mother? He looked surprised by the question. More than anybody. Does she take good care of you? Every day. What would you like this court to know? Noah hesitated. Then he answered with the simple honesty only a 10-year-old can have. My mom never quit. The courtroom became silent again. My leg got hurt playing baseball last year. He glanced toward me. Mom carried me into the emergency room even though her own leg was hurting. His voice cracked. She always says soldiers don't leave people behind. He smiled. And she never left me behind either. I felt tears running down my face, not because I was embarrassed, but because every difficult day, every painful therapy session, every lonely birthday, every sleepless night had somehow led to this moment. Judge Watkins quietly removed her glasses. Thank you, Noah. When she looked back at Daniel, her voice remained calm, but her disappointment was unmistakable. Mr. Carter, there is a significant difference between becoming interested in a child, she paused, and becoming a parent. Daniel lowered his head for the first time since I'd known him. He had nothing to say. Judge Watkins remained silent for several moments before delivering her decision. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the courtroom clock seemed louder than usual. Finally, she folded her hands and looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Carter, this court recognizes the importance of a child having both parents involved in his life." Daniel straightened slightly. For a brief moment, hope returned to his face. Then the judge continued. "But parenthood is measured by consistent love, sacrifice, responsibility, and presence, not biology alone." She turned toward me. "The evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that Mrs. Emma Carter has provided this child with a stable, loving, and secure home despite extraordinary physical challenges." She turned another page. "Your military injuries have not reduced your ability to parent." Another pause. "In fact, the evidence suggests they strengthened your commitment to your son." I lowered my eyes, holding back tears. 9 years, 9 long years. Every doctor's appointment, every late-night fever, every school project, every birthday, every Christmas morning, every difficult conversation. Someone had finally recognized all of it. Judge Watkins looked back at Daniel. "This court also finds that you voluntarily removed yourself from your son's daily life for nearly a decade." Her voice remained calm. "You cannot disappear during the difficult years and return only when the rewards become appealing." The courtroom stayed perfectly still. "Therefore," she closed the folder, "the petition for sole custody is denied." Daniel slowly closed his eyes. The judge wasn't finished. "However," she continued, "I believe children benefit from healthy relationships whenever possible." She looked directly at Daniel. "If you sincerely wish to become part of Noah's life, that opportunity still exists." His eyes lifted. "But it will not begin with custody. It will begin with trust." She ordered a gradual visitation schedule supervised by a family counselor. No sudden changes, no disruption to Noah's daily life. Every step would depend on Noah's comfort and emotional well-being. The hearing was over. People quietly gathered their papers. Linda squeezed my shoulder. "You earned this." "I don't know if I did," she smiled. "You've been earning it for 9 years." Outside the courthouse, the spring sunshine warmed the courthouse steps. There were no reporters waiting, no television cameras, just ordinary people walking back to their cars after another ordinary day in court, exactly the way I preferred it. Michael wrapped me in the biggest hug he'd given me since I returned from deployment. "I told you." "You did." No one was taking that boy away. Noah hugged both of us at the same time. For a few precious moments, everything felt wonderfully normal. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Daniel stood several feet away. He looked older, not because of gray hair, because something inside him had changed. His wife remained near the courthouse entrance, but didn't come any closer. For the first time in years, Daniel looked directly into my eyes. "I owe you an apology. I waited. I should have been there. Yes. I was selfish. Yes. I convinced myself leaving was easier." I nodded. "It was." He looked toward Noah. "I kept telling myself I'd have time later." His voice cracked. 9 years had disappeared. There wasn't much left to say. No speech could bring back Noah's first steps, his first baseball game, his first day of school, his nightmares, his birthdays. Those moments belonged to the past. "I can't change what I did," Daniel said quietly. "No. But I'd like the chance to become a better father." I looked toward Noah. This wasn't my decision anymore. He was old enough to have a voice. I knelt beside him. "You heard everything." He nodded. "What do you think?" He thought longer than many adults would have. Finally, he looked at his father. "You hurt my mom." Daniel closed his eyes. "I know." "You hurt me too. I know." Another long silence followed. Then Noah said something I'll never forget. "I don't forgive people because they deserve it." He glanced at me. "My mom taught me forgiveness is something you choose." Daniel began to cry. Real tears, not courtroom tears. The kind that come when someone finally stops lying to themselves. "I'd like to get to know you," Noah continued, "but slowly." Daniel nodded immediately. "As slowly as you need." That was the beginning. Not of a perfect family. Those only exist in movies, but of an honest one. Over the next year, Daniel showed up. Not perfectly, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes uncertain, but consistently. Family counseling wasn't easy. Neither was rebuilding trust. Trust grows much more slowly than it breaks. Little by little, father and son found common ground. Daniel even began volunteering with wounded veterans through a local nonprofit. One afternoon, he quietly admitted something to me. "When the judge read your military record," I looked at him. "I realized I'd spent years convincing myself you were broken." He smiled sadly. The truth was, I was the one who ran. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Life had already answered for me. Today, Noah's preparing for college. He still wants to serve others. Whether in uniform or through another profession, that's his decision. I'm simply proud that he grew into a compassionate young man. Not because life was easy, but because hardship never hardened his heart. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't have understood 9 years ago. The greatest victory wasn't winning in court. It wasn't proving Daniel wrong. It wasn't even hearing that sentence from my military record read aloud. The greatest victory was raising a son who learned that strength isn't measured by rank, medals, or revenge. It's measured by character. If this story touched your heart, I hope you'll remember one thing. The people who stay beside us through life's hardest battles often shape us far more than those who walk away. If you've ever witnessed that kind of quiet courage in yourself or someone you love, thank you for listening. And if you'd like to hear more stories about resilience, family, and second chances, I'd be honored if you shared this story or joined me again. The end.